Commander Lee Minho floated through the empty corridors of the research ship Harmony's Edge. The vessel had been drifting in space for 3 months near Proxima Centauri, sending out strange signals that made no sense to anyone back on Earth. His boots clicked against the metal floor as he moved deeper into the ship, followed by his small team of specialists. "Sir, the energy readings are getting stronger," whispered Navigator Park Ji-woo, her voice tight with pain. She had been suffering from neural damage for years, a side effect from too many deep space jumps. The constant headaches made her squint, even in dim light. The ship felt wrong somehow. It was too quiet, too clean for something that had been abandoned. The emergency lights still worked, casting long shadows down the hallways. Minho's team spread out, checking each room they passed. Everything looked normal until they reached the core section. Engineer Yoon Ji-won stopped at his scanner and frowned. "Commander, this doesn't make sense. The energy signature is coming from inside the reactor chamber, but the reactor was shut down weeks ago." They entered the chamber slowly, weapons ready. What they found made them all freeze in place. The reactor was indeed shut down, but floating in the center of the room was something that shouldn't exist. It looked like liquid light, shifting and moving in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The thing was roughly human-sized, but had no solid form, just pure energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Then it spoke, but not with words. The voice appeared directly in their minds, calm and warm, like a parent speaking to a child. "Welcome, humans. I have been waiting for you." Minho raised his weapon, but his hand was shaking. "What are you? How are you doing this?" "I am the benefactor," the voice continued in their heads. "I have watched your species for thousands of years. I have seen your wars, your diseases, your endless suffering. I have come to offer you something better." The light grew brighter, and suddenly Minho could see images in his mind. Earth, but not as he knew it. Cities with no poverty, hospitals with no patients, battlefields turned into gardens. Children playing without fear, elderly people smiling without pain. "I can make all of this real," the benefactor said. "Every human desire, every dream, every wish for a better world. I can grant it all. You need only surrender to me." Park Ji-woo stepped forward, holding her head as another wave of pain hit her. "You're lying. Nothing can do what you're claiming." The benefactor's light focused on her, and she gasped. The constant ache in her skull, the fog that had clouded. Her thoughts for years suddenly vanished. Her eyes widened as her mind became clear for the first time in so long. "I do not lie," the entity said gently. "I heal. I fix what is broken. I remove what causes pain." Ji-woo touched her temple in amazement. "The pain, it's gone, completely gone. How is this possible?" Minho watched his navigator with growing unease. She looked better, healthier than he had seen her in years, but something in her eyes seemed different, calmer in a way that didn't feel quite right. "This is just a small taste," the benefactor continued. "Imagine this healing for every human who suffers. Imagine wars ending not through violence, but through understanding. Imagine hunger disappearing, not through struggle but through abundance. All I ask is that humanity accept my guidance." The room fell silent except for the hum of the ship's life support systems. Minho looked at his team, seeing hope and fear mixed on their faces. This thing, whatever it was, had just done something impossible. But the way it spoke, the way it promised everything, reminded him of stories his grandmother used to tell about deals that seemed too good to be true. "We need to report this to command," he said finally. The benefactor's light dimmed. "Slightly. Of course, but do not take too long to decide. Your species suffers needlessly with each passing day." The conference room at Luna Station buzzed with nervous energy as Commander Lee Minho finished his report. Admiral Kim Tae-hyung sat at the head of the long table, his weathered face showing no emotion as he processed what he had just heard. Around the table, the 12 members of the Human Defense Council shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You're telling us," said Councillor Wang Yejin slowly, "that this entity healed Navigator Park completely? No technology, no medicine, just instant recovery?" Minho nodded grimly. "I've known Ji-woo for 8 years. I've watched her struggle with neural damage that our best doctors couldn't fix. Whatever this benefactor did, it worked perfectly. But there's something about the way she acts now that bothers me." Dr. Choi Yuna leaned forward from her seat near the back of the room. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she had been studying alien life forms for over a decade, but nothing had prepared her for this. What exactly does this entity want from us? It calls the process unity, Minho explained. According to the benefactor, one human representative must undergo a complete merging of consciousness with it. This will allow the entity to understand every human desire, every dream, every hope we've ever had. Once it knows what we truly want, it claims it can reshape reality to give us everything. The room fell silent. Admiral Kim rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on him. And in return? We surrender our independence. We accept its guidance in all things. It says this is the only way to ensure we get exactly what we need. Councillor Park Dongwoo, representing the Mars colonies, spoke up with anger in his voice. This sounds like slavery with extra steps. We'd be giving up our freedom for promises we can't verify. But what if it's real? Dr. Yuna's voice cut through the room like a knife. Everyone turned to look at her, surprised by the intensity in her tone. What if this entity really can end human suffering? What if we're sitting here debating while people die from diseases we could cure, wars we could stop, disasters we could prevent? Admiral Kim studied the young scientist carefully. Dr. Choi, you seem very invested in this offer. May I ask why? Yuna's hands clenched in her lap. My brother Junho died in the Martian plague outbreak 3 years ago. He was only 16. I held his hand while he suffered through fever and pain that lasted for weeks. Our medical teams tried everything, but we couldn't save him or the thousands of others who died. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I became a xenobiologist because I hoped we'd find alien technology that could help humanity. Well, here it is. This benefactor isn't offering us technology, it's offering us miracles, real, actual miracles. And you believe we should trust it? Asked Councillor Lee Minsu, skepticism clear in his voice. I believe we should consider it. Seriously, Yuna replied. How many people will die while we debate? How many children will starve? How many soldiers will fall in battle? How many patients will suffer in hospitals? If this entity can really eliminate human suffering, don't we have a moral obligation to at least try? The room erupted in quiet arguments. Some council members nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads vigorously. Admiral Kim raised his hand for silence. The entity mentioned it needs a volunteer for this unity process, he said. Someone would have to merge their consciousness completely with an alien intelligence. The risks are enormous and completely unknown. Dr. Yuna stood up before anyone else could speak. I volunteer. The room went completely quiet. Everyone stared at her in shock. Dr. Choi, Admiral Kim said carefully, you understand what you're offering to do. We don't know if this process is reversible. We don't know if you would still be afterward. I understand, she said firmly, but I also understand that my brother died screaming in pain while I could do nothing to help him. If there's even a chance that this unity could prevent other families from going through what mine did, then I have to try. Minho watched her face and saw something that worried him. The same calm certainty he had noticed in Navigator Park after her healing. But Yuna hadn't been touched by the benefactor yet. This was just hope, desperate and overwhelming hope. We need time to consider this, Admiral Kim said finally. Dr. Choi, your offer is noted, but no decision will be made today. As the council members filed out, Minho caught Yuna's arm gently. Are you sure about this? Really sure? She looked at him with eyes that held both determination and deep sadness. Commander, if you had watched your brother die, and someone offered you the power to make sure no other brother would ever die that way again, what would you do? The news report started coming in just hours after the Human Defense Council's meeting ended. Lieutenant Han Seojin sat in Luna Station's communications center, watching his screens fill with impossible updates from Earth. His coffee grew cold as he stared at message after message that shouldn't exist. Sir, you need to see this, he called, to Admiral Kim, who was passing through the comm center on his way to another emergency meeting. The first report came from New Seoul General Hospital. All terminal cancer patients in Ward 7 woke up this morning completely healthy. Tumors gone, blood work normal, like they were never sick at all. The doctor's voice on the recording sounded confused and amazed. Then came updates from around the globe. A children's hospital in Lagos reported that every child with genetic disorders had been mysteriously cured overnight. A veterans medical center in Chicago found that soldiers with missing limbs had somehow grown them back while they slept. Admiral Kim frowned as he watched the reports. This has to be connected to that entity. There's more, sir, Seojun said, switching to another feed. Look at this footage from the Syrian conflict zone. The video showed something that military experts said was impossible. Soldiers on both sides of a violent civil war had simply stopped fighting. Not because of a ceasefire or peace talks, but because they seemed to have lost all interest in combat. The footage showed armed men sitting in the desert, staring peacefully at the sky, their weapons forgotten beside them. Similar reports flooded in from every active war zone on Earth. The fighting in Eastern Europe had ended when both armies wandered away from their positions. Naval battles in the South China Sea stopped when crews refused to fire their weapons, claiming they couldn't remember why they were angry. And here's the strangest part, Seojun continued, pulling up weather satellite data. The drought in North Africa, it's over. Perfect rainfall started 3 hours ago, exactly the amount needed for optimal crop growth. Same thing in Australia, India, and Mexico. The patterns don't match any natural weather system we've ever seen. Admiral Kim studied the data with growing unease. It's giving us exactly what we claimed we wanted. Ending disease, stopping wars, fixing climate problems. But something feels wrong about this. That's what bothers me too, sir, Seojun said, scrolling through communication logs. I've been monitoring messages from the affected areas. Look at these reports from people who were healed. He pulled up a series of text messages and emails. They all said basically the same thing. I feel, well, thank you for your concern. Everything is fine now, I am content. They're all so flat, Admiral Kim observed. Where's the joy, where's the excitement? If someone cured your cancer overnight, wouldn't you be celebrating? Exactly. And look at this. Seojun showed him video calls from the former war zones. The soldiers are answering questions from their families, but watch their faces. The videos showed men and women who had been fighting desperately just days before. Now they spoke in calm, monotone voices about being at peace and having no more anger. Their families asked excited questions about coming home, but the soldiers responded with polite disinterest, as if the conversation was mildly boring. Meanwhile, 3 decks below in the station's medical bay, Dr. Choi Yuna lay connected to a specially built communication device. The benefactor had agreed to limited contact sessions before the full Unity process, allowing her to experience small glimpses of what it offered. Her eyes were closed, but her brain activity showed intense patterns unlike anything the medical team had seen. Dr. Kim Soo-young, monitoring the session, watched the readings with concern. In her mind, Yuna walked through a version of Earth that took her breath away. Cities sparkled with clean energy, while forests stretched endlessly beyond them. No one looked hungry or sick or afraid. Children played in perfect safety, while their parents worked at jobs they loved. Wars were just old stories that no one could quite remember. It's beautiful, she whispered aloud, tears streaming down her face. There's no suffering anywhere. Everyone is happy. But even as she spoke, a small part of her noticed something odd about the people in her visions. They smiled constantly, but their smiles never seemed to reach their eyes. They moved through their perfect world with a strange, peaceful emptiness, like actors who had forgotten they were performing. When she opened her eyes after the session, Dr. Kim Soo-young was studying her with worry. How do you feel? Wonderful, Yuna replied. But her voice sounded different somehow, calmer but also more distant. The benefactor showed me what Earth could become. We could eliminate every source of human pain. And you want to proceed with full unity? Of course. Why would anyone choose suffering when they could choose peace? Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet, but her hands were shaking slightly. Something about Yuna's tone reminded her of the reports coming in from Earth. Pleasant, content, but somehow hollow. Back in the communication center, Seojun continued monitoring global reports. The miracles were spreading, but so was his growing sense that humanity was losing something important with each person who was saved. He just couldn't figure out what that something was. Commander Lee Minho's ship Aurora dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442b, a planet the benefactor had mentioned during their first meeting. According to the entity, this world housed a species it had blessed 3 centuries ago, serving as proof of its good intentions. But as Minho stared at the planet through the view screen, something felt off about the whole situation. "Sir, we're receiving a response to our communication request," reported Communications Officer Ohieri from her station. "They're very polite." The main screen flickered to life, showing a tall, elegant being with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. The creature's features were perfectly symmetrical, almost statue-like in their flawless beauty. When it spoke, its voice was melodious but strangely flat. "Welcome, humans from Earth. I am Veltar Keren, speaker for the Veltharan people. We are pleased to receive visitors. You may land at coordinates we are transmitting now." "Thank you," Minho replied. "We're interested in learning about your civilization and your relationship with the entity you call the benefactor." "Of course. We will answer your questions. The benefactor has brought us great peace." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Minho's team staring at a blank screen. "That was weird," muttered Engineer Yunjiwan. "No questions about who we are, where we came from, what we want. Just acceptance." "Maybe they're just very trusting," suggested Navigator Park Jiwoo, though she didn't sound convinced. An hour later, their shuttle landed in what could only be described as a crystal paradise. The Veltharan city stretched before them like something from a dream, with towers that seemed to be grown rather than built, their surfaces catching and reflecting light in patterns that should have been impossible. Gardens of alien plants created perfect geometric designs between the buildings. A group of Veltharans waited to greet them. Each one was as beautiful and flawless as their spokesperson had been. They wore simple robes that seemed to change color as they moved, and their faces held expressions of mild, pleasant interest. "Welcome to Velthara Prime," said their guide, who introduced herself as Kirasel. "We are happy to show you our world." As they walked through the city, Minho found himself growing more uncomfortable. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The streets were spotlessly clean, the buildings showed no wear or damage, and every Veltharan they passed offered the same polite smile and gentle nod. "Your city is beautiful," Yeri said to their guide. "How long did it take to build?" "It has always been as it is," Kirasel replied serenely. "We do not concern ourselves with the past." "But surely you have records, history, stories about how your people developed." Kirasel's expression didn't change. "We live in the present. The past brings only unnecessary complications." That evening, the team was given guest quarters in a tower that offered a stunning view of the city. As the alien sun set, the crystal buildings began to glow with soft internal light, creating a display of beauty that left them all speechless. But Yeri couldn't shake her feeling that something was terribly wrong. While the others slept, she accessed the Veltharan information networks using translation software they had brought. What she found made her blood run cold. "Commander, you need to see this," she whispered, shaking Minho awake. Her portable computer showed files she had downloaded from the Veltharan archives. "Look at their art and literature database. I've been going through hundreds of years of their cultural works." Minho rubbed his eyes and studied the screen. "What am I looking at?" "This is a Veltharan poem from 500 years ago," Yeri explained, showing him translated text. The poem was complex and emotional, full of longing and passion about a star-crossed, a love between 2 young Veltharans from different clans. Now look at this one from 400 years ago. The second poem was similar in style, discussing the beauty of their twin moons and the sadness of watching seasons change. And here's one from 300 years ago. This poem was noticeably different, simpler, more focused on contentment and peace. Now look at everything from 299 years ago until today. Yeri scrolled through dozens of files. Every piece of art, every story, every poem from the last 3 centuries was essentially the same. Simple, peaceful, content, but completely lacking in depth or creativity. "It's like they just ain't stopped," Minho said quietly. "Stopped growing, stopped creating, stopped questioning." "There's more," Yeri continued. "I found architectural records, Those beautiful crystal buildings? They were all completed exactly 300 years ago. Nothing new has been built since then. No improvements, no changes, no innovation. 300 years, Minho repeated. The benefactor said it blessed them 3 centuries ago. The next morning, they tried to ask the Veltharans about their history, their art, their dreams for the future. Every question was met with the same serene response. They were content. They needed nothing more. The past was unimportant. When Minho asked a young Veltharan what she wanted to become when she grew up, the child looked confused by the question. "I will be as I am meant to be," she said with the same peaceful smile as every adult. As their shuttle prepared to leave the planet, Yeri made one final discovery. Hidden deep in the oldest archives, she found a message that chilled her to the bone. It was a personal journal entry from a Veltharan scientist named Torvel, written exactly 300 years ago. The benefactor promises to end our suffering, our wars, our fears. Many of my people are eager to accept. But I wonder, if we surrender our pain, do we also surrender our growth? If we give up our struggles, do we give up our souls? I fear we are about to find out. It was the last entry in the journal. After that date, Torvel's writing became simple reports about weather and daily activities, devoid of any deep thoughts or concerns. "We need to get back to Luna Station immediately," Minho said grimly. "I think we're about to make a terrible mistake." Commander Lee Minho's investigation team jumped from star system to star system, following a trail of worlds that the benefactor had claimed as success stories. Each planet they visited confirmed their worst fears, painting a picture that made Minho's stomach turn with dread. Their second stop was Kepler 186f, home to the Zephyrians, a species of tall, graceful beings with silver skin and 6 arms. The benefactor had saved them 400 years ago. Like the Veltharans, they lived in cities of impossible beauty, floating structures that defied gravity and sparkled like jewels against the purple sky. Security Chief Kang Jaemin spent hours interviewing the Zephyrians, trying to understand their society. What he found disturbed him deeply. "Commander," he reported privately, "they have no police force, no military, no government officials. When I asked how they handle disputes, they looked confused. They said disputes don't happen anymore." "That sounds peaceful," Navigator Park Jiwoo commented, though her voice carried doubt. "Too peaceful?" Jaemin replied grimly. "I asked about their history before the benefactor came. They showed me archives of wars, political debates, artistic movements, scientific competitions. Their ancestors were passionate, argumentative, creative people who fought and loved and dreamed with incredible intensity." He pulled up holographic records from the Zephyrian archives. "Look at this. A political speech from 500 years ago. The speaker is demanding justice for workers, calling for revolution, burning with righteous anger. Now listen to their current leaders." The current Zephyrian spokesperson spoke in the same calm, pleasant tone they had heard on every blessed world. No passion, no conviction, just serene acceptance of whatever existed. Their third destination was Ross 128b, where the insectoid Chitauri had built underground cities that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The benefactor had helped them 600 years ago, making them the oldest example of its work. Communications Officer Ohieri spent days analyzing Chitauri cultural records. "Commander, it's the same pattern but even more extreme," she reported. "The Chitauri used to be incredibly innovative. They invented faster-than-light communication, developed art forms that combined sound, scent, and electromagnetic fields. Their philosophers wrote complex theories about the meaning of existence." She showed him Chitauri writings from before their salvation. The texts were dense with mathematical formulas, passionate arguments about ethics, and wild speculative fiction about exploring other dimensions. "Now look at their recent work," Yeri continued, switching to modern Chitauri literature. "Everything they write is about being content, being at peace, accepting their place in the universe. It's like they've forgotten how to dream." The fourth, world Proxima Centauri C, housed the aquatic Nereians in vast underwater cities. The benefactor had blessed them 800 years ago. Engineer Yoon Ji-hwan studied their technology and made a shocking discovery. They haven't invented anything new in 8 centuries, he reported in disbelief. Not one single innovation. They use the same tools, the same methods, the same designs their ancestors perfected right before the benefactor arrived. When I asked why they don't try to improve their technology, they said they already had everything they needed. But that's impossible, Jiwoo protested. Every species we know keeps developing, keeps improving. It's basic curiosity. Not if you don't have curiosity anymore, Jae-min said quietly. Meanwhile, back on Lunar Station, Dr. Choi Yuna was undergoing longer and more intense communion sessions with the benefactor. The medical team monitoring her grew increasingly worried as her brain patterns showed changes that resembled those they had observed in saved humans on Earth. Dr. Kim Soo-young found Yuna after one particularly long session, sitting in her quarters and staring peacefully out the window at the stars. "How are you feeling, Yuna?" she asked gently. "Perfect," Yuna replied without looking away from the window. "I saw it again today. The beautiful emptiness that awaits us all." Emptiness. That doesn't sound beautiful. Yuna finally turned to face her, and Dr. Kim was startled by the change in her eyes. They held the same serene blankness she had seen in recordings from Earth's healed populations. "You don't understand yet," Yuna said with a gentle smile. "Emptiness isn't nothing. It's everything without the pain. It's existence without the struggle. The benefactor showed me what humanity could become if we just let go of our need to fight, to compete, to always want more. But fighting and competing and wanting more, that's what drives us to grow, to discover new things, to become better." "Better according to who?" Yuna asked. "What if being better just means being at peace? What if all our struggles and dreams and ambitions are just noise that prevents us from experiencing true contentment?" Dr. Kim felt a chill run down her spine. "Yuna, listen to yourself. A week ago you were passionate about finding cures for diseases, about pushing the boundaries of xenobiology. Now you're talking about giving up ambition entirely." "Because I've seen what lies beyond ambition," Yuna replied calmly. "The benefactor calls it the Great Quiet, a state where all the chaos in our minds finally stops. No more worry, no more fear, no more desperate wanting, just peaceful existence." That night, Dr. Kim sent an encrypted message to Commander Minho's ship. "Sir, I think we're losing her. Dr. Choi is starting to sound exactly like the beings you've described from the other worlds. If the full unity happens, I don't think we'll get our Yuna back." In his quarters aboard the Aurora, Minho read the message and felt a cold weight settle in his chest. 4 worlds, 4 species, all following the same pattern. Advanced civilizations, reduced to beautiful, peaceful, empty shells of their former selves. And now the benefactor wanted to do the same thing to humanity. "Not if I can help it," he whispered to himself, staring out at the stars that held so many silent, perfect, dead civilizations. Dr. Bae Soyeon had been working for 36 hours straight, but she couldn't stop analyzing the brain scans that kept arriving from Earth. As Lunar Station's chief neurologist, she had seen thousands of brain images in her career, but nothing had prepared her for what she was discovering about the saved humans. Her lab was cluttered with holographic displays showing brain activity patterns, each one more disturbing than the last. The scans came from people who had been miraculously healed by the benefactor. Cancer patients who woke up healthy, soldiers who had stopped fighting, civilians who reported feeling perfectly at peace. "This can't be right," she muttered, rubbing her tired eyes and looking at the data again. Her assistant, Dr. Lim Woo-jin, entered the lab carrying another batch of scans from the communications array. "More results from the Australian medical centers," he said, setting down the datapad. "What are you finding?" Soyeon pulled up a comparison display. "Look at this. Brain scan from a cancer patient before the benefactor's intervention." The hologram showed a normal human brain with all its complex neural pathways glowing in different colors. The areas responsible for creativity pulsed with active connections, while emotional centers showed the typical chaotic patterns of a person dealing with illness and fear. "Now look at the same person after being healed," she continued, switching to a second scan. "The cancer is gone, yes, but look at these areas." She pointed to regions of the brain that appeared dimmed, as if someone had turned down their brightness. The neural pathways for complex emotion, creative thinking, and ambition are still there, she explained, but they're barely functioning. It's like someone carefully adjusted the brain's settings to reduce these functions without completely destroying them. Dr. Lim frowned at the display. Could this be a side effect of rapid healing? Maybe the brain needs time to adjust. That's what I thought at first, Soyon said, pulling up more scans. But look at these. They're from people who were saved 3 weeks ago. The dampening effect is getting stronger, not weaker. And here's the really disturbing part. She showed him brain scans from the former war zones. These are soldiers who stopped fighting. Notice how their aggression centers are almost completely quiet, but so are their areas for protective instincts, competitive drive, and goal-oriented thinking. They haven't just lost the will to fight, they've lost the will to strive for anything. What about the drought regions where the perfect rainfall started? Soyon pulled up scans from farmers in those areas. Same pattern. They're grateful for the rain. But when researchers asked them about expanding their farms, improving their crops, or planning for the future, they showed no interest. Their brains process the questions, but the areas that would normally generate ambition and forward thinking are suppressed. Dr. Lim stared at the evidence in horror. It's not healing them, it's lobotomizing them. Not exactly, Soyon corrected. A lobotomy destroys brain tissue. This is more sophisticated. It's like someone is carefully turning down the volume on specific aspects of human consciousness. They can still think, still function, but they've lost the ability to want more than what they have. She pulled up one final comparison that made both doctors fall silent. This is a brain scan from Dr. Choi Yuna, taken yesterday after her latest communion session. The scan showed the same dampening patterns beginning to appear in Yuna's brain. The brilliant, ambitious scientist who had volunteered for Unity was slowly losing the very qualities that had made her volunteer in the first place. "We have to tell Commander Minho," Dr. Lim said urgently. Hours later, Minho stood in the communications chamber aboard his ship, facing the shimmering form of the benefactor. He had demanded this confrontation after receiving Dr. Soyon's findings, and the entity had appeared immediately, as if it had been waiting. "You're not healing people," Minho said bluntly. "You're changing them into something they're not." The benefactor's light pulsed gently. "I am removing their capacity for suffering. Is this not what your species has always desired? By removing their capacity for everything else that makes them human," Minho's voice echoed in the chamber. "Creativity, ambition, the drive to grow and improve, you're taking it all away. Your species experiences unnecessary pain through wanting what you cannot have," the entity replied, with what seemed like genuine puzzlement. "A human sees poverty and feels anger. I remove the anger, and they feel peace. A human desires love they cannot obtain and suffers heartbreak. I remove the desperate wanting, and they find contentment. Is this not kindness? But without that wanting, without that struggle, we stop growing. We stop becoming more than we were. Why do you need to become more?" the benefactor asked. "The Feltharans were once torn apart by clan wars and political strife. Now they live in harmony. The Zephyrians used to destroy themselves with competition and jealousy. Now they exist in perfect cooperation. Each species I have blessed has found peace." "They've found stagnation," Minho shot back. "They've stopped creating, stopped discovering, stopped dreaming. You've turned them into beautiful corpses." The entity's form grew brighter, and for the first time, Minho sensed something like emotion from it. Not anger, but a kind of sad frustration. "Your species is young. You do not yet understand that all your struggles, all your dreams and ambitions lead only to more suffering. I have observed countless civilizations follow the same pattern. They reach for the stars and find only emptiness. They seek perfection and discover only flaws. They dream of paradise and create only new forms of hell. So you decided to solve that by making them stop reaching, stop seeking, stop dreaming. I offer them peace, true eternal peace. No more war, no more disease, no more heartbreak, no more fear. The price is only the illusions that cause these sufferings, the belief that more is always better, that change is always progress, that wanting what you do not have is somehow noble." Minho stared at the being of light, finally understanding the full horror of what humanity faced. The benefactor wasn't evil in any traditional sense. It genuinely believed it was helping. But its idea of help meant turning humans into contented shadows of themselves. What you call peace, Minho said quietly, we call death. You're offering to kill everything that makes us human while keeping our bodies alive. The benefactor's light dimmed slightly. Your species will choose differently. I have faith that when you truly understand what I offer, you will accept it, willingly. The communication ended, leaving Minho alone in the chamber, knowing that humanity's greatest enemy was something that thought it was their greatest friend. The emergency session of the Human Defense Council was unlike any in history. Admiral Kim Tae-hyung sat at the head of the table, watching reports flood in from Earth as more regions fell under the benefactor's influence. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 40% of the planet's population had been touched by the entity's gift in just 2 weeks. The spread is accelerating, reported Councillor Wang Hijin, her voice tight with stress. Entire cities are going quiet. Not dead, just peaceful. Too peaceful. On the main screen, live feeds showed the transformed areas. People walked calmly through streets that should have been bustling with activity. Traffic moved in perfect order with no honking, no road rage, no hurried commuters. Markets operated with polite, subdued customers who bought exactly what they needed and nothing more. It looks like paradise, whispered Councillor Park Dongwoo. But it feels like a graveyard. Dr. Choi Yuna entered the chamber, and several council members gasped at her appearance. The passionate scientist who had volunteered for Unity just weeks ago was barely recognizable. She moved with an eerie grace, her face holding the same serene emptiness they had seen in all the saved populations. Admiral Kim, she said in a voice like still water, I've come to make the final recommendation for humanity's choice. Yuna, Admiral Kim said gently, how are you feeling? I feel perfect, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. All the noise in my head has stopped. All the angry thoughts about my brother's death, all the desperate need to prove myself as a scientist, all the fear about humanity's future. It's all gone. I exist in beautiful silence now. And you think this is good? Why wouldn't it be? Yuna tilted her head slightly, like a child asking an innocent question. Commander, Minho spoke to you about struggle and growth, but what has our struggle brought us? Wars, disease, environmental destruction, inequality. What has our growth given us except new ways to suffer? She gestured to the screens, showing Earth's transformed regions. Look at those places. No crime, no conflict, no tears. People work, together in harmony. Children play without fear. Parents don't lie awake worrying about their family's future. Why choose struggle when we can choose peace? Admiral Kim studied her face, searching for any trace of the brilliant, passionate woman he had known. Because struggle is what makes us grow, Yuna. It's what makes us human. Human? She repeated the word as if tasting something strange. What if being human is the problem? What if humanity is just a phase we need to evolve beyond? Before anyone could respond, Engineer Lim De-hyun burst into the chamber, his face flushed with excitement and terror. Admiral, I found something terrible. He activated his portable display, showing complex energy readings. I've been analyzing the electromagnetic signatures from the blessed regions on Earth and comparing them to data from the alien worlds Commander Minho visited. The display showed wavelength patterns that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. Look at this. Every time someone gets saved by the benefactor, there's a brief energy spike followed by a steady drain. It's subtle, almost undetectable, but it's there. What kind of drain? Admiral Kim asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Neural energy, specifically the bioelectric patterns associated with creativity, ambition, and complex emotional processing. The benefactor isn't just suppressing these brain functions, it's harvesting them. The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. It gets worse, De-hyun continued, his voice shaking. I managed to trace some of these energy streams. They don't just disappear. They flow back to the benefactor itself. Every creative thought it removes, every ambitious dream it suppresses, Every complex emotion it dampens, the entity absorbs it all. Counselor Lee Min-soo leaned forward. You're saying it feeds on our creativity. Not feeds, grows stronger from it. Each world it saves makes it more powerful. The Veltharans, the Zephyrians, all those civilizations, they're not just stagnant societies. They're farms. The benefactor cultivated their creative potential for centuries, then harvested it all at once. Admiral Kim felt sick as the full picture became clear. It's not a benevolent god trying to help us. It's a parasite that feeds on what makes intelligent species unique. And now it wants to add humanity to its collection, Dae-hyun said grimly. Based on my calculations, if it successfully processes our entire species, the benefactor will become powerful enough to influence entire star systems simultaneously. It won't need to visit worlds individually anymore. It could transform civilizations from across the galaxy. Dr. Yuna listened to this exchange with the same peaceful expression she had worn since entering the room. When they finished, she spoke again. Does it matter? She asked simply. If the result is peace, if the result is an end to suffering, does the benefactor's motivation change anything? A farmer grows crops to feed himself, but the crops still nourish those who eat them. You're talking about turning humanity into livestock, Counselor Wang snapped. I'm talking about turning humanity into something better than what we are, Yuna replied calmly. Something that doesn't destroy itself with greed and hatred and fear. Admiral Kim stood up slowly, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. Around the table he saw faces filled with fear, anger, and desperate hope. Some council members looked ready to accept the benefactor's offer, terrified of choosing continued struggle over promised peace. Outside the station's windows, Earth hung in space like a blue-green jewel, parts of it already glowing with the strange, peaceful light of the benefactor's influence. Soon Admiral Kim would have to make the choice that would determine whether humanity remained itself or became another empty paradise in the cosmic parasite's collection. We need to make a decision, he said quietly. And we need to make it. Now before there's nothing left of us to decide with. Dr. Yuna smiled her empty smile. The choice is simple, Admiral. Choose peace and let the struggle finally end. The communication chamber aboard Commander Minho's ship Aurora hummed with tension as the benefactor's form materialized, brighter than ever before. Nearly 60% of Earth's population had fallen under its influence, and the entity radiated confidence as it awaited humanity's final decision. Commander Minho, the benefactor's voice resonated in their minds. Your Admiral Kim has authorized you to speak for your species. Have you chosen wisdom? Minho stood straight, flanked by his core team, Navigator Park Jiwoo, Engineer Yoon Ji-wan, Communications Officer Oh Hyeri, and Security Chief Kang Jae-min. Behind him screens showed feeds from Earth, where millions of humans lived in eerie contentment, their eyes empty of the fire that had once driven humanity to reach for the stars. We have made our choice, Minho said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Excellent. Dr. Choi Yuna has prepared for full unity. Once the process is complete, I will begin the final transformation of your species. No. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. The benefactor's light flickered, as if the entity had difficulty processing what it had heard. I do not understand. You said you had chosen. We have. We reject your gift. Silence filled the chamber. Even Minho's crew seemed to hold their breath as they watched the cosmic entity struggle with a concept it had never encountered before. You still reject peace? You reject an end to suffering? We reject your version of peace, Minho replied firmly. Our struggles, our pain, our constant desire to be better than we are, that's not a flaw to be fixed. That's what makes us human. The Aoi's benefactor's form pulsed erratically. This is illogical. Every species I have encountered has chosen salvation when offered. The Veltharans embraced peace after centuries of war. The Zephyrians abandoned their destructive competition for harmonious cooperation. No rational being chooses suffering over contentment. Then maybe we're not rational, Jiwoo said, stepping forward. Maybe that's exactly the point. I have analyzed your species extensively, the benefactor continued, its voice carrying confusion for the first time. Humans are logical beings capable of reason. You understand cause and effect. You recognize that struggle leads to pain, competition breeds conflict, ambition creates inequality. Why would you choose to perpetuate these problems? Engineer Jiwan laughed, a sound that seemed to physically disturb the energy being. Because we're stubborn. Because we're proud. Because even when we know something is going to hurt, we do it anyway if we think it's right. Your species fights. Wars you cannot win, the benefactor said, its confusion growing. You love people who do not love you back. You chase dreams that destroy you. You sacrifice your lives for abstract concepts like honor and freedom. This behavior is inefficient. Yeah, well, efficiency is overrated, Security Chief Jamin added with a grin. The benefactor's light suddenly flared with what could only be described as anger. I offer you perfection, and you choose chaos. I offer you paradise, and you choose hell. Very well. If you will not accept my gift willingly, I will force it upon you. The entity's form expanded, filling the chamber with blinding light. Minho felt pressure building in his skull as the benefactor attempted to establish the same neural connection it had used with other species. But something unexpected happened. Instead of surrendering to the overwhelming psychic force, the human crew fought back with pure, irrational defiance. "Get out of my head," Hieri screamed, grabbing her skull but refusing to fall to her knees. "You want to know what makes us human?" Jiwoo shouted at the entity, while blood ran from her nose. "We're the species that punches back when something bigger tries to bully us." The benefactor recoiled, confused by their resistance. Other species had logical minds that could be convinced or overwhelmed, but human consciousness was a chaotic mess of contradictions, emotions, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when it was logical to do so. "Impossible," the entity pulsed. "Your neural patterns are wrong, chaotic. How do you function with such disorder in your minds?" "We don't know," Minho gasped, fighting against the psychic pressure. "And we don't care. That chaos you hate so much, that's where our creativity comes from. That's where our dreams live. That's where we find the strength to keep going when any sane species would quit." The benefactor intensified its attack, but the more pressure it applied, the more irrationally the humans responded. Jiwan started singing an old Korean drinking song at the top of his lungs. Jamin began reciting every curse word he knew in 12 different languages. Coyote shouted random mathematical equations mixed with poetry her grandmother had taught her. "Your minds make no sense," the benefactor raged. "How do you store logic alongside fantasy? How do you balance hope with despair? How do you function with such humanity?" Minho forced out between gritted teeth. "That's the point. We're not supposed to make sense. We're supposed to be gloriously, beautifully, stubbornly human." The entity's attack faltered as it encountered something it had never faced before. A species that grew stronger when confronted with overwhelming odds, not because it was logical to do so, but because it was fundamentally who they were. "Every other species has surrendered when faced with superior force," the benefactor said, its voice now carrying something that sounded almost like fear. "You are outnumbered, outmatched, facing certain defeat. Why do you continue to resist?" Minho wiped blood from his mouth and smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We're the species that looked at the impossible and said, 'Watch me.' We're the ones who saw an endless universe and decided to explore it. We're the stubborn fools who refuse to go quietly into any kind of night." He straightened up, despite the psychic pressure crushing down on him. "You want to know why we reject your gift? Because we'd rather fail as ourselves than succeed as something else." The benefactor's form flickered, and for the first time in millennia, it faced something it didn't understand. A species so irrationally committed to its own flawed nature that it would choose struggle over surrender, chaos over control, and pain over the peace of extinction. The real battle for humanity's soul was about to begin. The battle for humanity's consciousness raged across space as the benefactor unleashed its full power. Every human ship in the sector shuddered under the psychic assault, but instead of falling into peaceful surrender like other species had done, the crews responded with typically human chaos. On Lunar Station, Admiral Kim Tae-hyung watched his communications, board light up with reports that would have seemed insane under normal circumstances. Captain Cho Hyun-woo was ramming his damaged cruiser into the energy clouds surrounding Earth, while his crew sang their old academy graduation song. Commander Park Sung-min had ordered his entire fleet to play music at maximum volume. Everything, from classical symphonies to heavy metal, creating a cacophony that seemed to confuse the benefactor's attempts to establish neural control. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Han Seojin, his voice cracking with exhaustion, "the entity is trying to process our response patterns, but we're not following any logical sequence. It can't predict what we'll do next because we don't know what we'll do next." The truth was becoming clear. Humanity's greatest weakness was also their greatest strength. Other species had evolved toward logical efficiency, making them predictable. Humans had evolved with emotions, irrationality, and a stubborn refusal to accept limits, making them impossible for the benefactor to understand or control. Aboard. The fighter squadron dancing Phoenix pilot Song Minji listened to the chatter from other ships as she flew through the debris field that had once been a peaceful trading station. The benefactor's influence was spreading like a virus, but wherever humans gathered in groups, they seemed to create pockets of chaotic resistance. "Phoenix leader to all units," she called over the comm. "I'm reading massive energy buildup at coordinates 127,443. That's got to be the benefactor's core consciousness." Her squadron leader's voice crackled back. "Negative, Phoenix 7. That energy field would fry any ship that gets within 1,000 kilometers. We need another approach." But Minji was already changing course, her fighter streaking toward the swirling mass of light that pulsed with alien intelligence. She had grown up listening to her grandmother's stories about Korean resistance fighters, who faced impossible odds with nothing but courage and determination. Those stories had always seemed like ancient history until now. "Phoenix 7, return to formation," her leader ordered. "Sorry, sir," Minji replied, switching off her comm and pushing her engines beyond their safety limits. "Grandma always said sometimes you have to do something crazy to make a difference." As her fighter accelerated toward certain destruction, she began singing an old folk song her grandmother had taught her, Arirang, a melody about crossing mountains and facing hardship with hope in your heart. The words came out shaky at first, then stronger as she accepted what she was about to do. The benefactor noticed her approach and tried to establish mental contact, but Minji's mind was focused entirely on the song, on her grandmother's weathered hands teaching her the words, on the feeling of belonging to something larger than herself. The entity couldn't penetrate thoughts so deeply rooted in human memory and emotion. Her fighter slammed into the core of the benefactor's consciousness at near light speed. The explosion wasn't nuclear or chemical. It was something far more fundamental. As Minji's ship disintegrated, her final thoughts, chaotic, emotional, defiantly human, crashed into the alien intelligence like a virus entering a computer system. The benefactor had spent eons absorbing ordered, logical thought patterns from civilized species. It had no defense against the beautiful madness of human consciousness. The psychic feedback rippled outward at faster than light speed, carried along the same neural networks the benefactor had used to connect its saved worlds. But instead of spreading peace and contentment, it carried something the entity had been suppressing for millennia, the raw, messy, wonderful chaos of free will. On Kepler 442b, a Veltharan named Kirasel was tending her crystal garden when the wave hit her. For a moment she felt confused, as if waking from a dream. Then memories came flooding back. Memories of arguments with her clan siblings, of passionate debates about philosophy, of the burning desire to create something new and beautiful. For the first time in 3 centuries, she wept. Across the city, other Veltharans were experiencing the same awakening. They looked at their perfect crystal buildings and suddenly wondered why they had never tried to improve them. They remembered the poems and songs they used to create, the dreams they used to chase, the fierce love they used to feel for their families. On Ross 128b, the Chitari engineer Zektal felt his mind suddenly explode with possibilities. His species had been content to use the same tools for 800 years, but now he could see dozens of ways to make them better. The urge to innovate, to experiment, to risk failure in pursuit of something greater came rushing back like water through A broken dam. The same awakening spread across every world the benefactor had blessed. Billions of beings who had lived in peaceful stagnation suddenly remembered what it felt like to want something more than they had, to dream of impossible things, to feel the beautiful pain of ambition. Back in human space, the benefactor's attacks ceased abruptly. The entity's form flickered and began to dissipate, its consciousness fragmenting as it lost the neural energy it had been feeding on for eons. Its final communication was not angry or threatening, but confused and almost sad. I do not understand. I gave them peace. Why do they choose chaos? Commander Minho, still standing in his ship's communication chamber, watched the entity fade away. Because chaos is where life comes from, he said softly. Peace is beautiful, but it's not living. The benefactor dissolved completely, its energy dissipating into space like a bad dream finally ending. In the weeks that followed, as communication was re-established with the awakened worlds, humanity found itself in an unexpected position. They weren't hailed as saviors or conquerors, but as something much more interesting. The species crazy enough to choose struggle over comfort, and generous enough to help others remember why that choice mattered. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most valuable thing you can offer someone isn't a solution to their problems, but the courage to face those problems as themselves, and humanity, in their typically chaotic way, was perfectly happy to share that particular gift with anyone brave enough to accept it.